Hi, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. Welcome to Loom Knitters Sockumentaries. This series of videos accompanies my book, Socks of All Sorts for Loom Knitters. This book gives you 5 styles of sock top to choose from, 3 styles of heels, from traditional to super easy, 3 styles of toes, sizes from infant to extra large adult, and toe up and toe down methodology. You use the pattern by selecting your details, size, and gauge, and inserting the correct values from charts that are included into a fill-in-the-blank pattern. By doing this, you can knit about 1,000,000 styles of sock in any size you wish. The videos are to help you with some basic skills that make your sock knitting successful. I have another video on short rowing toes, but since that video I have learned to work around my camera better. The camera is right there between me and the work, so in order for you to see it, I have to work around it. That wasn't the easiest thing to learn, and I mean I've improved since last time, plus the lighting is better today. So let's start knitting our toe. The toe is knitted on half of the pegs, no matter how large the socks are, or sock is, I guess. No matter what size sock, if you're knitting on 32 pegs, you knit your toe on 16 of them. In this case, we're knitting on 28 pegs, so our toe is knitted on 14. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we're going to go around the corner. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This is peg 15. It goes with the other half of the sock, so we're not going to knit it. We're going to come back across. And this time we will knit 1 peg fewer. We will knit 14. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I said we're going to knit 14, but we already knitted 14 once. We're knitting 13 this time. I knew something sounded odd. That's the 13th. We wrap the 14th, but we're not going to knit it, and it's easy to get mixed up because we're always wrapping and knitting. I put my finger on it so I won't forget. And start knitting back the other way. Let us talk for a moment about the wrapping. Without the wrapping, holes would develop next to the last knitted peg, because you're going to knit that peg twice, once going left and once going right. That would create a little bit of length that wouldn't be on the next piece of knitting over, and that would make a hole. Wrapping it gets around that problem. Alright, 1 fewer peg. So we're ready to wrap on this end. There are some things to remember about wrapping. First, although you almost always want to do it, there are 1 or 2 situations in which you do not want to do it. The exception that comes to mind is very fuzzy yarns. I don't know if you know the yarn Hobby Lobby Pitter Patter. I've knitted some little footies in that. That's a fluffy, fuzzy, they call it an eyelash yarn, but the eyelashes are very, very short. Let's stop for a minute and talk about what we're doing. We've now knitted up to this peg, and it is time. This one was held last time, in other words, wrapped but not knitted. Time to wrap this one and not knit it. In fluffy yarns such as Pitter Patter, they will fill in the hole. You don't necessarily have to wrap. And you can wrap if you want, but I encourage you to do a swatch and see which you like better, because wrapping does make the heel or toe, whichever you're working on, a tighter, more complete fabric. However, in yarns such as that one, it also may create a thick or a stiff spot. So you need to swatch and choose. Okay, this is the last one to knit on this row. Let me turn this up so you can try to see. And back we go. This is called short rowing in, because we're moving towards the center of the work. The number of stitches in work is getting smaller and smaller, so we are short rowing in. I didn't invent that term. It's been in the knitting world for eons. In my book, there is a chart about short rowing in and short rowing out, so you don't have to guess what is a good number of rows to short row in and out. So you need not guess how many rows to short row in and out. It's delineated for you. Actually, the way my chart shows it is how many stitches should be left in work when you finish your short rowing in and start to short row out. And it also gives you a total number of rows that will have been added after you complete the short rowing in and out process, because you do need that information sometimes when figuring lengths. Alright, this one's been wrapped, this one's been wrapped. This one was knitted last time, so this time we're going to wrap it, but not knit it and start going the other way. In this case, we have 14 heel or toe stitches. Right now we're working on the toe, but the heel was done in the same manner. And we're going to short row in until 4 stitches are left in work. There's 3. Whoops. 4, 5, 6. We're ready to wrap that peg and go back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, wrap, and here we are on our last inward row. 1, 2, 3, 4. We also wrap this row. Now we begin to short row out. So I did 4 stitches were knitted last time, 1, 2, 3, 4. This time I'm also going to knit this one for a 5th stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now on this stitch, there are 2 strands of yarn. That one wanted to fall off, already on the peg, and I'm going to knit both of them over, but they can be lifted over separately if that's easier, as I just did. I have the choice here of wrapping again or not wrapping again. Actually, on very many yarns, wrapping going in and skipping it going out is plenty. But this time I think we'll demonstrate it, wrapping both ways. And the only way to know for sure on any particular yarn is to do what nobody wants to do, swatch it and see. This time I've got both on my hook. There we go. Wrap. On a loom, the return stitch, the first one as you start going the other way, is truly a little bit easier to knit if you do wrap the neighboring peg. Let me show you. Here we are. Now we have wrapped this twice. So we will have 3 loops to knit over. That's okay, that's fine. 1, 2, 3. Now if I don't wrap and just go back, it's a little harder to get this stitch over than it is if it's held by the next peg over. It's not a big deal in most yarns. In yarns with less stretch than this one, it can be a little bit more of a big deal. And going back to the right. There we go. Let me see if I can turn it this way so that we can see what I'm doing better. Yeah, that works. 3 to knit over. And oops, they didn't all go at once. I thought they would. There they go. Wrap. And going back. And you can see my row is getting longer and longer. The effect of this is to make a pouch of knitting. When we get to the end of this row, we'll stop and look at it. People have trouble understanding that the heel and toe short rows are done exactly the same, because in our minds the heel and toe are nothing alike. But here's what's happening. When you do the heel, half of the rows are running underneath your foot, and half are running up the back of your foot. It's not totally, utterly true, because the heel is not a right angle. And since the heel is not a right angle, some of the rows are really making a curve around the edge of the heel. But that's why it doesn't go in our minds to be the same as the toe. In the case of the toe, we actually are short rowing in such a way that we're starting on the bottom of the foot. And by the time we get to the smallest of the rows, we finish short rowing in, we are at the point of the toe. And then we begin knitting as we short row out the top of the toe. So in the case of the toe, half of the rows are under the foot and half of the rows are on top of the foot. And then we seam or graft in a position basically where your toes start on your foot, varying a little bit with the shape of the foot. Okay, here's the one. Oops. Sometimes these 3 don't want to behave, but they're going to. They just don't know it yet. One and 2, 3 over at once. There we go. So we only have 2 more on this end and 2 more on this end to complete the toe. I'm trying to turn at different angles so that everybody can see what's happening from any vantage point that works to get it into your mind. There's one more thing that I want to go into There is a slight difference between heels and toes. In the case of heels, of course, the sock is continuing, and actually it's going to be stretched quite a bit in the area of the heel. So when we begin a heel, we wrap the neighboring peg that is not going to be in use. And as we short row back out, we do the same. In the case of toes, we're going to be closing them by sewing or grafting together. And that wrapping makes the grafting process more complicated and less neat at the very edge rather than improving it. So you will have noticed that I did not wrap around to, let's see, it would have been this peg and this peg when beginning my toe, nor will I do so as I complete it. And that's the only difference I can think of between the way we knit heels and toes. There they all go. Wrap one more time. Now, as I have been working on this, it may have become clear to you the value of a stretchy yarn. If this yarn didn't stretch, the process would have been harder on me, harder on the yarn, could have put pressure on the loom pegs. Plus, no matter how hard I tried, I just wouldn't have had as neat and tidy of stitches. They would have had to grow a little bit to accommodate the wrapping and pulling over process. We're approaching our very last stitch on this end of the toe. And here it is. Okay. As a reminder, if this were a heel, I would now wrap here. But it's not, so I'm not. And we're on our last strip back. When I reach the last stitch, I'm going to break the yarn and leave a good long tail. I can use that tail to do the grafting, and therefore the yarn will be continuous, which means one less end to weave in. Now let's look at what we've got. There's our heel. It was knitted on the same pegs. Here's the toe. You can sort of see the little pouch, but it won't fully form until we get these off of the loom. I leave about 2 feet. You don't need that much really in this gauge, but it's something good to start with. My next step is to scrap off. I'm going to use a contrasting yarn because I find that the easiest way to do the grafting.